When my daughter told me I was becoming a burden during her pregnancy, I stepped back to give her the space she demanded. I sold my house, moved into a cramped apartment, and learned to live with the silence. But 4 months later, when she called me crying at 2 a.m., begging me to drop everything and help her, I discovered the real reason she'd pushed me away. And by the time I understood what she and her husband had been planning, I'd already lost more than I ever imagined I could. What happened next taught both of us what the word burden really means. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The kitchen was filled with afternoon light when the phone rang. It was the kind of April day that makes you believe winter might actually be over. The kind where you open windows and let fresh air push out the stale cold that's been sitting in your house for months. I was 70 years old, had been retired from my job as a mechanical engineer for 6 years, and I was standing at my kitchen counter making a sandwich when I saw my daughter's name flash across the screen. Margaret, my Maggie. I picked up on the second ring, smiling already. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" There was a pause on the other end, not the comfortable kind where someone's just gathering their thoughts. This was the heavy kind, the kind that presses down on your chest before a single word is spoken. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded strained, stretched thin like a wire about to snap. I set down the butter knife. "What's wrong? Is everything okay with the baby?" Margaret was 7 months pregnant with her first child, my first grandchild. A girl. They were planning to name her Elena. I'd been so excited about it that I'd already converted my spare bedroom into a nursery for when they'd visit. I'd painted the walls a soft yellow, assembled a crib, and even hung little star-shaped lights that twinkled when you plugged them in. "The baby's fine," she said, but her tone suggested that wasn't the whole story. "Then what is it?" Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her choosing her words carefully. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Trevor and I have been discussing our situation." Trevor, her husband of 4 years, a corporate lawyer with an expensive watch and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The kind of man who always seemed to be calculating something, even when he was supposedly relaxing. "Discussing what situation?" I asked, moving to sit down at the kitchen table. Something in her voice told me I'd want to be sitting for this. "Well," she drew the word out, "with the baby coming in 2 months, we've been thinking about what we need, what's going to be best for our family." "Okay," I said slowly. "That makes sense. And we've realized that we need to establish some boundaries. Some space." The word hung in the air between us. Space. I'd heard that word before, usually right before someone told you they didn't want you around anymore. "What kind of space?" I asked. "Dad, you've been really involved. Like really involved. You call me almost every day. You drop by the house without warning. You keep asking if we need help with things, if we've bought this or that for the baby, if we've made decisions about childcare." She paused. It's a lot." I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught her to make pancakes when she was 8 years old. The same table where we'd sat together doing homework after her mother died, where I'd helped her study for every major test from middle school through her master's degree in business administration. "I was just trying to help," I said quietly. "I thought that's what grandparents do." "I know, Dad. I know you mean well, but Trevor and I are adults. We're 32 years old. We have good jobs, we have a plan, and we need to figure this out on our own, without someone constantly checking in on us." The words landed like individual stones, each one adding weight to something growing in my chest. "So what are you asking me to do?" "We need you to step back. Give us room to breathe. Stop calling so much. Stop just showing up. Let us come to you when we need something. I processed this slowly, trying to understand what had changed. Just 3 weeks ago, Margaret had called me excited about finding a deal on baby clothes. 2 weeks before that, she'd asked me to come over and help them paint the nursery. What had shifted? Did something happen? I asked. Did I do something wrong? No, Dad. It's not about something you did. It's about, she sighed, and I could hear frustration creeping into her voice. It's about you not having anything else in your life. You retired 6 years ago, and ever since, it feels like Trevor and I have become your entire world. Every conversation is about us, about the baby. You don't talk about hobbies or friends or anything you're doing. It's like you're just waiting around for us to need you. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. After Martha died 12 years ago, work had been my anchor. When I retired, Margaret and Trevor had become the center of my universe. But I'd thought that was normal. That's what family did. I can back off, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. If that's what you need, thank you. She sounded relieved, which somehow made it worse. We really appreciate it, Dad. It's just that right now, honestly, having you so involved feels like, she trailed off. Feels like what? It feels like a burden. The word landed like a physical blow. A burden, not a help, not a support, a burden. I sat there in my kitchen, the afternoon light suddenly feeling less warm, less hopeful, and tried to figure out what to say next. I understand, I finally managed. I'll give you the space you need. Thank you, Dad. We'll call you after the baby comes, okay? And we'll figure out a visiting schedule that works for everyone. A visiting schedule, like I was a service provider who needed an appointment. Okay, I said. I love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. She hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone for a long time. The sandwich I'd been making sat forgotten on the counter. Outside, I could hear neighborhood kids playing, their laughter drifting through the open window. Inside my house, there was only silence. The days after that phone call moved like sludge, slow and heavy. I stopped calling Margaret, stopped texting to ask how she was feeling, or if they needed anything. I deleted the reminders I'd set on my phone to check in with her. I stopped driving past their house on my evening walks, even though it meant taking a longer route that made my knees ache. The silence was louder than I'd expected. I tried to fill my days with things that proved I had a life beyond my daughter and son-in-law. I went to the community center and looked at their schedule of activities. There was a woodworking class on Tuesdays, a book club on Thursdays, and a poker group that met every other Friday. I signed up for the woodworking class, thinking maybe I could build something. A bookshelf, a birdhouse, something that proved I was more than just a father waiting to be useful. The first class was fine. The instructor, a retired carpenter named Vincent, was patient and thorough. The other students were friendly enough, but the whole time I was there, sanding down a piece of pine that would eventually become part of a simple box, I kept thinking about the crib I'd assembled in my spare bedroom. The one Margaret would probably never use now that I was supposed to maintain space. My friend Harold noticed the change in me. Harold Brennan and I had worked together at Midwest Engineering for 31 years before we both retired. Now we met every Thursday morning at a diner called Rosie's on Elmwood Avenue, a place that served coffee strong enough to strip paint and breakfast that never changed no matter how many years passed. "You're quieter than usual," Harold said, dumping creamer into his coffee. "Something on your mind?" I told him about the phone call, about Margaret asking for space, about the word that kept echoing in my head, burden. Harold frowned, his weathered face creasing even deeper. "That doesn't sound like Maggie. She's always been close to you."
Maybe I didn't know her as well as I thought. Or maybe she's 7 months pregnant and her hormones are making her say things she doesn't fully mean. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to think this was temporary, that after the baby came, things would go back to normal. But the way she'd said it, the relief in her voice when I'd agreed to back off, it hadn't sounded like hormones. It had sounded like something she'd been wanting to say for a while. "I'm doing what she asked," I said, giving her space. Harold stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug. "Space is one thing, Raymond, but don't vanish completely. You're her father. That doesn't just stop because she's having a tough moment. I'm not vanishing, I'm just stepping back." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying, because stepping back felt an awful lot like disappearing. By the middle of May, I'd made a decision that felt both inevitable and impossible. The house was too big for one person. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a backyard with a garden I hadn't tended in 2 years, and a garage filled with tools I barely used anymore. Every room echoed with memories. Margaret's old bedroom, still decorated with posters from her college years. The dining room, where we'd hosted every Thanksgiving and Christmas after Martha died. The basement workshop, where I'd taught Margaret how to use a drill, how to measure twice and cut once. But Margaret was right. I was clinging to a life that didn't exist anymore. She had her own family now, her own homes, her own owners, and I was just an old man rattling around in a house full of ghosts. So I called a realtor. Her name was Patricia Vance, and she was efficient and professional. She walked through my house, took notes, and gave me a number that was higher than I'd expected. "The market was good," she said. "Families were looking for homes in this neighborhood. The school district was excellent. How soon are you looking to move?" she asked.
"As soon as possible," I said. The house went on the market on a Wednesday. By Friday, I had 3 offers. By the following Monday, I'd accepted one. A young couple with twin boys who loved the backyard and the tree house I'd built when Margaret was 9. I signed the papers without hesitation, even though each signature felt like I was erasing something important. I found a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side of Riverside, near the public library and a small park where people walked their dogs. It was less than half the size of my house, but it was clean and quiet and came with a parking spot. The rent was reasonable. The landlord was a retired teacher who didn't ask too many questions. I didn't tell Margaret until after I'd moved. When I finally called to give her my new address, her voice was careful, measured. "You sold the house?" "Yeah. It was time, Dad. You didn't have to do that. You said I needed to get a life of my own. That's what I'm doing." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her standing in her kitchen, one hand on her swollen belly, trying to figure out what to say. "Well," she said finally, "I'm glad you're doing what's right for you." I wanted to ask if she meant it. I wanted to ask if she'd ever actually cared that I'd raised her in that house, that every wall held a memory of us together. But I didn't. "How are you feeling?" I asked instead, keeping my voice neutral. "Tired, really tired, and enormous. I feel like I'm carrying a bowling ball. Not much longer now. No, just about 6 weeks. That's exciting." "Yeah." The conversation felt like we were reading from a script, hitting our marks but not really connecting. "Well, I'll let you go," I said. "Okay, thanks for letting me know about the move." "Sure." We said goodbye, and I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, and felt that familiar crack widen in my chest, the one that had started with the word burden and kept spreading with every conversation that felt more distant than the last. I tried to settle into my new life. The apartment was easier to maintain than the house. Less to clean, less to worry about. I could walk to the library and check out books that I'd read halfway through before losing interest. I could walk to the park and sit on a bench, watching people live their lives while I tried to figure out what mine was supposed to look like now. The woodworking class continued. I finished the box I'd been working on, then started on a picture frame. Vincent complimented my attention to detail, said I had steady hands for someone my age. The other students were nice enough. There was a woman named Claire who was building a jewelry box for her daughter, and a man named Tom who was working on a chessboard. We'd chat during breaks, surface-level conversations about the weather and the projects, and nothing that mattered. Harold still met me every Thursday at Rosie's. He'd ask about Margaret, and I'd tell him we were giving each other space. He'd frown but wouldn't push. That's the thing about good friends. They know when to leave things alone. But at night, alone in my apartment, I'd lie awake and replay that phone call. The way Margaret's voice had sounded when she'd said burden, the relief when I'd agreed to back off. And I'd wonder if I'd failed her somehow, if I'd been so focused on being useful that I'd forgotten to ask if she actually wanted my help. Or maybe she'd just outgrown needing a father. June arrived with humidity that made the air feel thick. My apartment didn't have central air, just a window unit that rattled and dripped condensation into a bucket I had to empty twice a day. I spent a lot of time at the library, where it was cool and quiet, and I could pretend to read while my mind wandered. Margaret's due date was getting closer. June 28th, 3 weeks away. I wondered if she'd call when she went into labor, if I'd be allowed at the hospital, if I'd meet my granddaughter right away, or if I'd have to wait for an approved visiting window. The uncertainty gnawed at me. On a Tuesday evening, I was making dinner, a simple pasta with jarred sauce, when my phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, figuring it was a spam call, but something made me pick up. Hello? Raymond Fletcher? Yes, this is Diane Morrison. I'm Trevor's mother. I set down the wooden spoon I'd been holding. I'd met Diane exactly twice. Once at Margaret and Trevor's wedding, and once at a strained Christmas dinner 3 years ago. She was a real estate agent who lived 2 hours away in Springfield, and had opinions about everything. Hello, Diane. Is everything okay? I'm calling because I think you should know what's going on with Margaret and Trevor. My heart rate picked up. What do you mean? Is Margaret okay? Is the baby okay? They're fine physically. But Raymond, I think there's something you need to understand about what's been happening. I sat down at my small kitchen table, my appetite gone. I'm listening. Trevor came to visit me last weekend. Without Margaret, he wanted to talk. She paused. Raymond, did Margaret tell you that they asked you to back off? Yes, she said they needed space. Did she tell you why? She said I was too involved, that it felt like a burden. Diane made a sound that might have been a laugh or a scoff. That's what Trevor told her to say. The kitchen suddenly felt colder despite the heat. What? Trevor has been planning this for months. He doesn't want you involved in their lives, or the baby's life. He thinks you'll be a bad influence, that you'll undermine his authority as a father. He convinced Margaret that you were being overbearing, that you needed to be pushed away. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was saying. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because it's wrong, and because Trevor let something slip when he was talking to me. Something about how once the baby comes, they'll have a reason to ask you for help, financial help. My stomach dropped. What kind of financial help? I don't know the details, but Raymond,
I think they're planning something, and I think you need to be careful. We talked for a few more minutes. Diane apologized for not calling sooner, said she'd been trying to stay out of it, but couldn't anymore. She gave me her number and told me to call if I needed anything. When I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and stared at the pasta cooling on the stove. Financial help. Margaret and Trevor both had good jobs. Margaret was a marketing director at a tech company. Trevor was a partner at his law firm. They'd bought their house 3 years ago, a nice place in a good neighborhood. They drove new cars, took vacations. Why would they need my financial help unless they didn't need it, unless they wanted it? I got up and went to my small desk in the corner of the living room. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, old habits from my engineering days. When things got complicated, you wrote them down. You made lists. You found the pattern. At the top of the page, I wrote what I know. Margaret called me a burden. Trevor convinced her to say it, according to Diane. They asked for space, right when I sold my house. Diane says they're planning to ask for financial help. Under that, I wrote what I don't know. What kind of financial help? When they'll ask what they'll use as leverage. If Margaret knows about this plan. I stared at the lists for a long time, my pasta forgotten, my mind racing through possibilities. Then I added one more line, under what I know. I need to be ready. The next few weeks crawled by. I didn't call Margaret, didn't reach out, just waited. I kept going to the woodworking class, kept meeting Harold for breakfast, kept trying to build some kind of life that didn't revolve around my daughter. But at night, I'd take out that notebook and look at my lists. I'd think about Diane's warning, about Trevor's plan, about what Margaret knew or didn't know, and I'd prepare myself for whatever was coming. Harold noticed I was distracted. Over coffee one Thursday morning, he set down his mug and looked at me hard. You gonna tell me what's really going on, Ray? Or are we going to keep pretending you're fine? I told him about Diane's call, about Trevor, about the mention of financial help. Harold's expression darkened. They're setting you up for something. I don't know that for sure. You sold your house, Ray. You have money now. They know that. You think this is about my money. I think you need to protect yourself. Get your accounts in order. Make sure nobody has access to anything they shouldn't. Margaret wouldn't. Margaret might not even know what Trevor's planning. But you need to be smart about this.
He was right. I knew he was right. That afternoon I went to my bank. I met with a financial advisor, a sharp woman named Linda Chen, who listened to my concerns without judgment. We moved my money into accounts that required two-factor authentication. We set up alerts for any transactions over a certain amount. We made sure that nobody could access my accounts without my explicit permission. You're doing the right thing, Linda said. Protecting yourself isn't the same as not trusting your family. It's just being smart. But it felt like distrust. It felt like I was preparing for my own daughter to betray me. You cleaned, she said. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd make myself useful. She moved to the coffee maker, then stopped. I can't have coffee, doctor's orders. I can make you tea. No, it's fine. I'll just have water. She filled a glass from the tap and sat heavily at the kitchen table. Any word from Trevor? I was going to ask you the same thing. She shook her head. Nothing. His phone goes straight to voicemail now. I sat across from her, studying her face. In the morning light she looked exhausted, but also guarded, like she was preparing for something. Margaret, we need to talk. I know. Really talk about what's been going on, about why Trevor wanted me out of your life. She looked down at her water glass. Dad, it's complicated, then uncomplicated for me. She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Trevor thinks you're too controlling. that you don't respect him as the man of the house. He said, having you around all the time undermined his authority. His authority. That's how he sees it. He wants to be the one making decisions for our family. And he felt like you were always there, always offering opinions, always acting like you knew better. I let that sink in. Did you feel that way too? She didn't answer right away. Sometimes, maybe. I don't know, Dad. You were really involved. And Trevor kept pointing it out, kept saying we needed to establish boundaries. So the phone call 4 weeks ago, telling me I was a burden, that was Trevor's idea. He suggested I needed to be more direct with you, that you weren't getting the hint. What hint? I thought we had a good relationship. We did. We do. But Dad, you have to understand. Trevor is my husband. I have to consider his feelings too. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. A neighbor was walking their dog. A car drove past, normal life continuing, while mine felt like it was cracking apart. Margaret, I sold my house because of that phone call. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment because you said I needed to get my own life. I didn't ask you to sell your house. No, but you made it clear I wasn't welcome in your life anymore. What was I supposed to do? Keep living in a house full of memories while my only daughter cut me out? She started crying again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I turned back to face her. How far did you mean for it to go? She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Fear, maybe, or calculation. I just wanted some space to figure out my marriage. Trevor and I have been fighting a lot. About money, about the baby, about everything. And he kept saying that part of the problem was you, that we couldn't be a real family unit with you constantly hovering. So you chose him over me. I chose my husband, Dad. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? The question hung in the air between us. On one level she was right. A spouse should come first. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation. When is Trevor coming back? I asked. I don't know. He won't answer my calls. Do you want him to come back? She looked startled by the question. Of course I do. He's my husband, the father of my baby. Even though he walked out on you 2 days before your due date, he didn't mean it. He was just stressed. Once he calms down, he'll realize he made a mistake. I pulled out a chair and sat back down. Margaret, I need you to be honest with me about something. Okay. Are you and Trevor having money problems? Her eyes widened slightly. Just a fraction, but I caught it. Why would you ask that? Because Trevor's mother called me. She said Trevor mentioned something about needing financial help. And then Trevor conveniently disappears right after I sold my house, leaving you alone and scared enough to call me at 2 a.m. Margaret's face went pale. His mother called you last week. She was worried about what Trevor was planning. What did she say exactly? That Trevor wanted me out of the picture for a reason. That once the baby came, you'd have leverage to ask me for help. Financial help. Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. That's not true. Diane doesn't know what she's talking about. She's always had it out for me. So you're not having money problems. Everyone has money problems, Dad. Do you know how expensive it is to have a baby? The hospital bills alone are going to be thousands even with insurance. And we had to buy all new furniture for the nursery, and the car seat, and the stroller, and clothes, and diapers, and formula. I thought you were going to breastfeed. She stopped mid-rant. What? 3 months ago you told me you were planning to breastfeed. That's why I didn't buy you any formula when I was shopping for baby supplies. She sat back down, her hands shaking slightly. I changed my mind. The doctor said formula might be easier. I didn't point out that doctors don't typically recommend formula over breastfeeding unless there's a medical reason. I just filed the information away. How much do you need? I asked quietly. She looked up at me, surprise and something else crossing her face. Hope maybe, or triumph. What? If you're in financial trouble, how much do you need? Dad, I'm not asking you for money. But if you were going to ask, how much would it be? She hesitated, and I watched her do the math in her head, watched her calculate how much she thought she could get away with asking for. The hospital bills are going to be around $15,000 after insurance, and we're behind on the mortgage. About 3 months behind, that's another $9,000, and Trevor's car payment is overdue. That's another $1,200. So maybe $25,000 to get us caught up. $25,000, a quarter of what I'd made from selling my house. That's a lot of money, Margaret. I know, that's why I'm not asking. We'll figure it out. Cow, if Trevor left and you're about to have a baby, how are you going to come up with $25,000? She looked down at her hands. I don't know. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside I could hear a lawnmower starting up somewhere down the street. Margaret, did you know Trevor was planning to leave? Her head snapped up. What? No, of course not. Because the timing is awfully convenient. You get me to sell my house and move away, creating distance between us. Then, right before the baby comes, Trevor leaves, creating a crisis. And suddenly you need help. The kind of help that costs money. Dad, that's not. And I'm supposed to believe this is all just coincidence. She stood up again, her face flushing with anger or embarrassment. You think I planned this? You think I wanted my husband to abandon me right before I gave birth? I think someone planned something. Maybe it was Trevor, maybe it was both of you. But I'm not going to hand over $25,000 without understanding what's really going on. Fine. She was crying again, but this time it felt different, more angry than sad. Don't give me anything. I'll figure it out on my own. Just like I've been doing for the past 4 weeks while you were off sulking in your new apartment. I was giving you the space you demanded. I didn't demand anything. Trevor demanded it, but you went along with it. You called me a burden, Margaret. You said having me in your life felt like I was suffocating you. Were those his words or yours? She didn't answer. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, one hand on her belly. And that's when I realized something. The baby hadn't moved this entire time. I'd been around enough pregnant women in my life to know that by 7 months, babies are active. They kick, they shift, they make their presence known. But Margaret's hand on her belly wasn't responding to movement. Oh, it was just resting there, like a prop. When's the last time you felt the baby move? I asked. She looked startled by the change in subject. What? The baby? When did you last feel her kick? This morning. Before I came downstairs. Are you sure? Yes, Dad. I'm sure. Why are you asking me that? Because I've been watching you for the past 20 minutes, and I haven't seen you react to any movement. So, maybe she's sleeping, or maybe something's wrong. Have you been to the doctor recently? I have an appointment next week. Next week? Margaret, you're due in 2 days. I know when I'm due, Dad. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Harold. Coffee this morning. Need to talk to you about something. I looked at Margaret, at her defensive posture, at the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I need to go, I said. What? No, Dad. You can't leave. What if Trevor doesn't come back? What if the baby comes? Then you call 911 like everyone else does. Or you call one of your friends. Or you call Trevor's parents. But I need you here. No,
I said, picking up my jacket from the back of the couch. You need someone here who will give you money without asking questions, and that's not gonna be me. Not until I understand what's really happening. Death implies that please. I stopped at the door and turned back to look at him. I stopped at the door and turned back to look at her. Margaret Cora. Margaret, I love you. I always will. But I'm not going to let you or Trevor use me. When you're ready to tell me the truth, the whole truth, the whole truth, you call me. Until then, I'm going out. I'm going home. Going home.
I walked out, closing the door behind me on her protests. My hands were shaking as I got into my car. Part of me wanted to turn around, go back inside, tell her everything would be okay. But the other part, the part that had been growing stronger since Diane's phone call, knew I was right to leave. Something was wrong here, something beyond a husband getting cold feet, and I needed to figure out what it was before I made any decisions about helping. I started the car and pulled away from the house, watching in my rearview mirror as Margaret stood on the porch, one hand on her belly, watching me go. And I wondered if I just walked away from my daughter in her time of need, or if I just avoided walking into a trap.